Ever since humanity became a post-industrial society, we have had the tools required to end all unnecessary human suffering stemming from the inability to access resources and improve the standard of living of humanity as a whole. I am not exaggerating. Poverty is entirely preventable and has been for a long, long time. The good news is we are closer than ever to achieving a true, universal, decent, minimum standard of living for all of humanity, and we can do it within our lifetimes. There are 5 basic needs all of humanity requires to have a fulfilling life and truly have the opportunity to not just survive day to day, but thrive. To do what one might say they were born to do. Even if you can afford some food and rent, if you're working a dead-end job that you hate and can't even save money from, you're stuck in a cycle where you can only realistically either stay in the same place in your life for years, or worse, potentially fall further into debt and poverty if something unexpected and devastating happens, like a health emergency or large vehicle repair. Almost half of Americans can't afford even $400 for an unexpected emergency. And that was in 2017. Think about that. Even if you enjoy your job, you probably aren't really saving anything. And again, most people can't even afford an emergency to happen. And then, if you can't, then you fall into debt and the cycle gets even worse. As stated, these 5 needs are food, housing, healthcare, education, and transportation. These are basic services that, when provided universally, not only would totally end unnecessary poverty, but also actually are necessary to expand and progress humanity into the post-scarcity and eventually post-planetary levels that we have imagined and predicted of ourselves since at least the 50s and 60s, and even before, and which, if we don't achieve, will lead to the end of civilization as we know it, from economic collapse and climate disaster spiraling out of control, the effects of which we are already seeing today. But the good news is, not only can we provide these things to everyone, it will mean that everyone, including the currently destitute, can now participate in the economy where they are needed and fit in the most. Rather than fighting for the unstable, underpaid, and undervalued service and other jobs where people are exploited and treated as expendable and preyed upon by their employers, especially those who don't currently have stable housing and access to proper nutrition, now won't have to suffer unnecessarily while dragging on the communities that they can't even participate in, by being forced out and onto the street and into lives of violence, robbery, and widespread drug abuse, while being the largest demographic victimized by these problems just so they can survive and cope with the reality of life without stable support systems. In fact, most people experiencing homelessness are employed and still homeless, which leaves them ripe for being exploited and terrible working conditions because they don't really have many options. We already produce enough food to feed over 10 billion people, but waste about a third of it. It would take a lot to create a global network of providing food to everyone, especially in ways that don't disrupt local farm communities and food webs. But the best way to do it everywhere is to connect people to locally created food and secondarily establish larger and larger connections of food distribution, starting in cities and working the way out. Start small and bigger, combining hubs to create distribution networks everywhere. The issue of feeding the world is not one of production, but one of distribution, which is already mostly solved by private methods. These already created distribution networks could be utilized, copied, or expanded upon, and then used to make sure that once the food is distributed, it does not get wasted. Even just expanding and combining existing local and federal food credit programs and then giving away soon-to-expire food for free would cut down on food insecurity immensely, and from there, expand and connect systems and hubs little by little to make sure no food is wasted and everyone is fed, with distribution fine-tuned to supplement local food products for variety and to make up for less agricultural areas. Much like with food, the global issue of housing insecurity, especially in highly developed countries, is not simply an issue of supply and demand. It is a problem of distribution and quality. Housing First programs in places like Finland, as well as the many housing-focused programs of Singapore, have been incredibly successful and effective. We have more empty houses than homeless people in the United States, and so, technically could, as proven by the pandemic, literally place everyone without somewhere to live in somewhere that currently exists, even if some of those places are hotel rooms or other unused houses or apartments. At least until we create enough minimum standard high-quality housing or apartment units that anyone can live in as needed for as long as they like, no matter what, until they can afford to or would like to move. When housing is guaranteed to all who need them, along with food, with or without the other services, some people would still choose to live in vans or even through permanent camping, just because that's all they want or need. And that is a right they should have, along with the right to a home should they decide they want one. Involuntary homelessness is a crime against humanity, and our descendants will look back on us with disgust for allowing it to continue for as long as it will remain, all while being completely unnecessary and fixable the entire time. When people don't need to be concerned with food or housing, they are much better equipped and likely to apply themselves to find a career or careers to fulfill themselves and contribute to society, not just because they feel obligated, but because they have the opportunity to do the kinds of jobs they want to do. They will be open and available to do what needs to be done for society without needing to deal with exploitation from employers or other pressures from financial insecurity. If you don't like your job and feel you could do better elsewhere, knowing you have stable housing no matter what gives you the room to take risks and ask for better pay, or even leave and feel safe to take the time to find a career better suited to you, or that is perhaps less stable or consistent, but that may pay out better in the long run, like arts and entertainment-focused careers, or even just work part-time hours so you can focus on more interesting pursuits just for fun, while not having to worry about food and rent bills. We have known for years, decades, generations, centuries even, that the more education is accessible, the better everyone's lives become. Even those who do not utilize the educational opportunities receive benefits, because everyone who do are now able to apply their learning and expertise in a field they enjoy or feel some compulsion towards, thus improving the overall economy and progressing humanity as a whole. Oftentimes, under the current system, people have to take out loans simply to get a degree, because they are passionate and want to learn the subject and or get a decent career in that field. But because of this, they often only get one shot. What happens if they choose the wrong subject? What if the market changes and they can't find work? Or what if they can, but the entry-level pay isn't enough to pay the loans? Or what if they simply aren't suited to the material? Those loans are still going to be there no matter what, and now they're caught in a trap of possibly putting themselves even further into debt by trying again or choosing a different path. But more likely, they just end up back where they started, but now strapped with debt, which increasingly becomes more unpayable as the growing interest surpasses even the original loan. Education is about learning and improving yourself. It's not gambling. It shouldn't be possible to end up worse off than when you started. But even if you don't care, the student debt crisis affects the entire economy, and you included, just like homelessness. When people can't participate in the economy, they drag it down, leaving it on everyone else to make up the difference. A healthy economy and society is one where people are not trapped by debt or poverty, but free to take chances and try new things, without the chance of falling to a place they can't bounce back from. True freedom isn't the freedom to fail, it's the freedom to try. And if you do fail, it's the freedom to be able to get back up again. Currently, the education as business model leads to classes being large and schools being incentivized to give out loans and fill the class with students whether or not they are suited or even interested in the material. Meaning students who aren't suited don't often leave or change focus because they feel they have no choice. Now that they've taken out the loan, they're committed and incentivized to stick it out even if they'd be better suited elsewhere due to the sunk cost fallacy. Instead, with universal education, there's no downside to leaving if it's not for you. This means students are less pressured to take classes that they aren't interested in or suited to, while also feeling more free to branch out and try new things. This then means average class sizes will shrink over time, allowing teachers to focus more individually on the remaining students, while the others can find another path, or leave and try again in the future, even several times, rather than falling further and further behind and possibly just to fail anyway. This also means instead of loading up on classes to try to get the most bang for their buck, potentially overwhelming themselves, students can take a more measured and focused curriculum and at their own pace, with more energy to put into what they are studying. This encourages people to take more niche and specialized classes, perhaps even ones led by people more immersed in the field who may not otherwise have had the opportunity to teach and share their knowledge and experience directly. The result is a positive feedback loop of education and educators, expanding the frontiers of academia and the arts, progressing humanity's collective knowledge base quickly and efficiently without incentivizing students to load up on classes they aren't properly inclined to or yet ready for, paving the way for those that are to progress as quickly and efficiently as they can, finally breaking down the ivory tower of academia and fostering a culture of sharing and expanding knowledge that is accessible to everyone. This also includes trade schools. In fact, it should probably start with them. Make all trade schools universally available, and the trades will be learned and filled in no time. And those that learn but don't work in the field will be able to learn more trades and expand their skills to find more specialized and or complex work, moving from tradesmiths to engineering experts as a matter of course. Or not. Perhaps one is happy in their career and just wants to learn for the sake of it. Why not? People would probably do both simultaneously and switch between career and educational focus for their entire lives. In addition to creating a self-sufficient and skilled populace, the economy becomes well guarded against labor and job shortages, because people can just learn the needed skills to fill the shortage with no risk, and when automation outpaces the workforce in a labor sector, there's no major loss. People can just go home and start learning and try something else, maybe related or totally different. There's a reason we already do this for elementary to high school age children. We could very quickly and easily make guaranteed access to education a lifelong opportunity, and it will benefit us all. Even those who don't take the opportunity would benefit indirectly, and those who do won't be held back, but rather propelled forward by those who don't, because those people won't be in the way, taking up time and resources that could better be used on those who want to and are comfortable being there. So now we have everyone fed, housed, and educated. But how can they get to work? Or what if they need to move for their work or to get their education? Transportation is an often neglected need, especially in the US, but increasingly throughout the world, because cars are becoming the center of urban and rural planning rather than the actual people that live there and the business and commerce that drive the economy. Cars are a luxury that has become a necessity. They are a steep investment that decreases in value immediately after purchase. The older they get and the more they are used, the more frequent, costly, and complex the repairs become. They are also a huge contributor to unnecessary death and injury, and as a result they must be properly registered and insured, piling up the unnecessary costs higher and higher and higher. Society has become entirely built around accommodating them, forcing landmarks and destinations to be further and further apart to accommodate the widening of roads and space for storage and parking, which takes up valuable real estate that doesn't make up for its wasted space even in parking costs and tickets for violations. As more and more space is dedicated to car-focused infrastructure, it further increases the need for individuals to have a personal vehicle, leading to more traffic. And most cars are only carrying the driver about 90% of the time, which is wasteful both to the environment and to the road space needed to accommodate all these vehicles, creating an endless downward spiral of wasted land, time, and resources, which slows and shrinks the general economy as space becomes scarce and cars become more expensive, while also becoming more necessary, which leads to more traffic, repeating the cycle on and on and on. The solution to this problem has been known for almost all of history. Before the invention of personal cars, people still obviously had to get around, and so towns and cities were built to accommodate pedestrians and walking, as well as trains and trolleys and streetcars, and finally bikes and scooters or motorcycles, which are much smaller and more efficient than cars. Yes, cars are nice. They are private, as well as provide direct travel from A to B across long or short distances. But that is why they get expensive and should not be the primary, and in a lot of cases, the only option. They simply do not offer the efficiency and stability that public transportation and pedestrian-based infrastructure can. Transportation is a highly overlooked and neglected need that applies to everyone, much like sanitation and plumbing. because when it is done best, it is often invisible and taken completely for granted, and only really comes into focus by most people when it becomes a problem, which our global overdependence and reliance on cars has become. Now, cars themselves aren't inherently problematic, and do have benefits they can offer. As I said, they are private, and when driving one you are in control and can go straight to where you plan on going, as long as you know where the destination is and there are appropriate roads and a place to park when you get there, which is why they have become so ubiquitous. Although, that is also from car manufacturers lobbying for the car to be the primary focus of civil transportation infrastructure, with public transportation being an afterthought that is often made to accommodate car transportation rather than the other way around as it should be, and often with no thoughts whatsoever to pedestrians and people on bikes. Cars are best in more rural communities where land is naturally more available and population is lower, or for very specific or emergency situations where time is of the essence, like in ambulances or in VIP travel, which is why they are a luxury and cost what they do. They are an investment, but they have become a necessity without losing the cost of luxury. Even more ordinary and lower budget vehicles are expensive and difficult to maintain long term, especially without maintenance knowledge and tools along with the time and space to fix them. Things most people who are not career car mechanics do not even have one of, let alone all three which are required for home maintenance. The reason varied and well-funded public transportation options, all the way from walking and biking to high-speed, long-distance railways, are so important is because even when food, housing, education, and careers and livelihoods are in universal supply, without the logistics of travel, food cannot be made accessible to everyone. People cannot get to where they need to go, or move easily across long distances for purposes of work or education, or even just because they'd like to. Well-funded public transportation infrastructure means not only can people and commerce more easily get where they need to go, but valuable real estate and land can be more efficiently used and less of it is needed because we don't need large parking lots and roads and multi-lane highways to transport large volumes of people, each with their own independent vehicle taking up individual space and parking, stretching communities and destinations simply to accommodate the space of it all. Roads can be thinner and more varied without the need to process hundreds to thousands of cars every day, again often only carrying one single person, and we can completely eliminate the dreaded and dangerous invention, the strode, as coined by strong towns. A strode is a type of street-road hybrid. Common in the United States and Canada, stroads are wide, often highway-like, but with stops and lights preventing high speeds that often provide access to strip malls, drive-thrus, and other automobile-oriented businesses. Unlike streets, which are designed for people and commerce, and roads, which are designed for high-speed, longer-distance travel, stroads are inefficient and dangerous and the worst of both, only created to serve car-based travel rather than the destinations and community that travel infrastructure is meant to serve. While streets serve as a destination and provide access to shops and residences at safe traffic and walking or biking speeds, and roads serve as a high-speed connection that can efficiently move traffic at high speed and volume, stroads are an expensive, inefficient, and dangerous combination of the two, designed only to serve cars. Let me reiterate. Transportation is meant to serve the community, not the other way around. And electric and self-driving cars are not the solution either. The solution is looking back to the past and at places in Europe and Asia like Scandinavia and Japan that have innovated these age-old and common-sense transportation strategies far beyond what would ever be possible by forcing cars to be the end-all, be-all of transportation and community organization. And tech bros trying to reinvent the wheel, but more expensively and less efficiently and all around just worse, simply to preserve and expand the demand and need for cars and car infrastructure so the few people profiting off these luxuries-made necessities can benefit at all of our expense, including their own, because even if they are profiting from it, the inefficiencies and problems still affect them too when they have to travel and get stuck in traffic like everyone else. Not only is healthcare just a no-brainer when it comes to the idea of providing it to everyone, especially when we already have all the necessary ability, but it is the most glaringly obvious example in terms of not providing these services are not only less effective, but cost more than just providing them to everyone. Not that that really matters, considering we're talking about human lives, but it's the truth. The data is undeniable. The United States spends more on healthcare than any other country, and with worse outcomes. Even countries with comparatively minuscule GDPs to the United States with universal healthcare programs have better outcomes for less money. There is just no excuse. Universal healthcare is, to most people, the most obvious piece to the puzzle, because, as I stated, it has already been implemented around basically the rest of the entire developed world. It is wanted by the majority of the country, and the results speak for themselves. Universal, single-payer healthcare is just objectively cheaper and more effective than private insurance-based healthcare. The results speak for themselves. By any metric, desirability, cost, health outcomes, whatever, universal healthcare is superior. However, an important caveat that has been missing from the discussion is that universal healthcare, by definition, must include universal mental health care. It cannot be neglected. By caring for and healing the world's illnesses, mental, physical, and emotional, etc., we can make sure that the population is in tip-top shape to do whatever needs to be done. Physical health care alone simply is not enough. There is a massive epidemic of loneliness and hostility in this world right now. Even for those who have their physical needs more or less covered, neglecting mental and emotional health care leads to unhappy and antisocial behavior that can cause violence. It also leads to less productivity and efficiency in the workplace, which harms the economy. For those who only see things in economic terms, this is still a major problem. People are overworked, undervalued, and feel hopeless, even when they are doing things they might otherwise enjoy. Humanity is a social species, and even those with social phobia need human connection of some kind, as well as to feel heard and valued, to live a full life and reach their full potential. A lot of this is due to society, especially in the US, no longer being built around positive human interaction and connection. With a lack of free or even just affordable third spaces that are community supported and well maintained, where people can unwind and relax or play and exercise, like community centers and parks, where groups of friends and families and other community members can mingle and interact in safe and social spaces. Spaces where different ages and groups have socialization areas primarily catered to them, where they can interact with their peers on their own but still be safe. Think parks or playgrounds for children, spaces for teens to young adults, and adult spaces like bars and pubs, as well as shared spaces where everyone can interact and get along. This section might be separated into its own sixth category called community, but to focus on the importance on mental health as a necessary part of healthcare in creating a poverty-free society, I am putting it under mental health to emphasize the importance of mental health as a part of universal healthcare. Well, there are at least these 5 basic categories: food, housing, healthcare, education, and transportation. They all overlap and synergize such that when combined, the result is far more than the sum of their parts, creating a positive feedback loop leading to a constantly improving, sophisticated, complex, and beautiful society where everyone is free to make the most of their lives without any unnecessary hardship or glass ceilings. While each of these services, if properly funded and maintained individually, would boost the standard of living and productivity of society on its own, every part must be completely united and without any element neglected in order to not only just end poverty, but create an unshakable foundation for society to grow and improve upon continuously and forever. Making regular health care available to all keeps us physically healthy. But by addressing our emotional and psychological needs, we will no longer be held back by our traumas and insecurities, allowing humanity to achieve its full potential without any unnecessary or artificial obstacles, finally curing the disease of poverty forever. Everyone imagines that if they didn't have to work for a living, they'd want to sit at home all day doing nothing but playing games and watching TV, eating junk food, and letting themselves go. But there's actually a medical word for this. It's called depression. Yes, we all need more time off, But what we really need is to answer our calling, be it artist or architect, bus driver or janitor, or all of the above and more. But the only way to learn those skills, let alone even know for sure that you want to learn them, is to better understand and accept ourselves. Humanity was promised more than what we've been given. We were promised the opportunity to make the most of our lives, that it was up to us, not society, what we make of ourselves. And we can fulfill that promise by ending the artificial and unnecessary plague of poverty by meeting our 5 basic needs. The only reason poverty even exists is because all our wealth and resources are being hoarded to the top, not to the hardest workers or to the ones who move society forward, but to those who simply happen to own the deeds to the businesses, land, and tools, the people actually doing all the work used to create wealth, rather than the workers actually using those tools who create that wealth. But that's the system we designed. Poverty is not a bug, it's a feature, designed to more easily facilitate the transfer of wealth from the workers who create it to the owners who hoard it. There are dark times ahead. We are in the midst of the single largest and fastest transfer of remaining wealth to the oligarchy from everyone else. Technology is being used not to eliminate poverty, but to expand it more than ever, creating a wealth gap larger than any time in human history, and completely intentionally. This was the goal all along, but it doesn't have to be. The solution is simple. It's time to change the programming. That's what makes human beings special. Whether it's eliminating smallpox or polio, or going to the moon, whenever we put our minds to something as a group, it gets done. And now what needs to be done is to end poverty and artificial scarcity. Food, housing, healthcare, education, and transportation. UBS, Universal Basic Services. The way to end poverty.